The galaxy didn't always have warning signs about us. There was a time before the Treaty of Sol, before the quarantine zone, before the stories of human ferocity spread across the stars like wildfire. I know because I was there when it all changed. My name is Ventral, Senior Xenoanthropologist of the Galactic Coalition. For 30 cycles I've studied the most dangerous species in known space. Not the sulfur-breathing Cryagi with their acid spit, not the hive-minded Zendi whose warriors stand 3 meters tall. No, I study humans. And I'm breaking protocol just by recording this. It started with a misunderstanding, as these things often do. The Coalition had encountered thousands of species before, and first contact procedures were well established. We'd observe from a distance, analyze communications, make cautious approaches. With humans we followed the same protocols. Our observers reported a fractured species that spent most of its history fighting itself. Primitive by Coalition standards, barely beginning to explore their own star system. The assessment board classified them as pre-unification, limited threat. Standard procedure. Laughably wrong. When our diplomatic vessel approached Earth, it was shot down over something called the South China Sea. The humans claimed it was an accident, a misidentification. Perhaps it was. We'll never know for certain. What we do know is that within 48 Earth hours of the incident, our observation post on their moon was surrounded by hastily constructed human spacecraft. Crude vessels cobbled together from existing technologies, held together by what appeared to be desperation and ingenuity. Their weapons were antiquated by our standards, nuclear warheads and kinetic projectiles. But they were pointed at our outpost with unwavering precision. "This is General Sarah Chin of the United Earth Defense Force," came the transmission. "You have been monitoring our planet without consent. You will power down your systems and prepare to receive our representatives." United Earth Defense Force? Our intelligence indicated no such organization existed. Humans had hundreds of separate nations constantly squabbling. Yet somehow, in 2 planetary rotations, they had unified their military command. The Coalition Council was amused at first. A pre-FTL civilization making demands? Our outpost commander, following protocol, attempted to explain our peaceful intentions. "With respect, General," he transmitted, "the Galactic Coalition has been observing Earth for decades as part of our standard xenosociological research. We apologize for the unfortunate incident with our diplomatic vessel, but we assure you it was a misunderstanding. We'd be happy to establish proper diplomatic." "You have been watching us for decades without our knowledge," interrupted Chin. "You have collected data on our weaknesses. You have mapped our defenses. And now one of your ships has deployed unknown technology over a heavily populated area. From our perspective, these are acts of aggression." The Council's amusement faded as the humans sent representatives to our lunar outpost. They arrived in pressure suits that looked like they'd been assembled that morning. Their ship's hull showed evidence of having been repurposed from a civilian vessel. But their determination was unmistakable. Dr. Li Wei and Commander Thomas Rodriguez were the first humans to officially meet representatives of the Coalition. The recordings of that meeting are now required viewing for all diplomatic personnel. "We understand we're technologically outmatched," said Li, her voice calm despite the extremely dangerous situation. "But you should understand something about humans. We've spent our entire history fighting. Each other mostly. But also disease, natural disasters, limitations of resources and knowledge." Rodriguez leaned forward then, his expression visible through his helmet visor. "What Dr. Li is too polite to say is that humans are very, very good at war. We've perfected it over thousands of years. And we've been preparing for alien contact, including hostile contact, for over a century. Your civilization appears fractured," our diplomat noted. "Your nations compete rather than cooperate." We smiled at that. "Yes. And that's our strength, not our weakness. That competition drives innovation at a pace unified species can hardly comprehend. When we cooperate, though..." She gestured around them. 48 hours ago this ship didn't exist. Neither did the United Earth Defense Force. We built both because we had to. What followed was a demonstration. The humans requested permission to show the Coalition what they were capable of. Against my recommendation, the Council agreed. They were still not taking the humans seriously. 3 days later, a human vessel, again, one that hadn't existed the previous week, approached an uninhabited moon in the neighboring system. What they did there changed Coalition security doctrine forever. Using only the resources they'd brought with them and mining operations they established on arrival, The humans constructed weapons of devastating creativity. Not advanced by our standards but used in ways we'd never considered. They turned simple fusion technology into improvised stellar disruptors. They weaponized their understanding of gravity in ways our scientists had theorized but never implemented. Most disturbingly, they demonstrated an ability to adapt our own technology. They captured a coalition drone and within hours had reprogrammed it to serve their purposes. This is what humans do when threatened, Rodriguez explained afterward. We adapt. We improvise. We overcome. And we've been imagining conflicts with alien civilizations for generations. We have libraries full of strategies for fighting enemies with superior technology. The council was horrified, not just by what humans could do but by how quickly they did it. And that was with pre-FTL technology. What would happen if they acquired advanced coalition tech? The Treaty of Seoul was signed 6 months later. Earth was classified as a Type 4 restricted world. Contact regulations were established. Warning beacons were placed at the edge of their solar system. That was 20 years ago. Since then, humans have developed their own FTL capabilities. They've established colonies on 14 worlds. They've formed trade relationships with some coalition members. And they've maintained the most effective military force relative to their technology level that I've ever documented. The warning still stands. Approach humans with caution. Threaten them at your peril. They are the crazy masters of war that the galaxy never expected. And despite everything, or perhaps because of it, I continue to find them utterly fascinating. The most dangerous species in the galaxy may also be its most promising. I just hope the rest of the coalition comes to understand what I've learned. Humans aren't dangerous because they love war. They're dangerous because they've spent millennia trying to end it, and will do whatever it takes to protect what they love. This is Ventral signing off. If you're watching this, perhaps it's time you learn the truth about humanity too. War and it's a law to not approach them. HFY Story. I didn't intend to become the galaxy's foremost expert on humanity. When I joined the Coalition Xenological Survey, I was pursuing research on convergent evolution across carbon-based life forms. Then I witnessed that first meeting on the lunar outpost and everything changed. My colleagues warned me against specializing in human studies. Career suicide, they called it. Humans were seen as a dangerous anomaly, best kept at arm's length. But I couldn't look away. There was something compelling about a species that could unite so quickly when faced with an external threat. 3 years after first contact, I requested permission to establish a research station on Earth. The request was denied 7 times before the Council reluctantly approved a limited mission. I was allowed to bring a team of 5 researchers to a facility in a region called New Zealand. The location was chosen because it was geographically isolated yet connected to global human networks. The humans called it a gesture of trust. The coalition called it a calculated risk. My first true conversation with a human happened there. Dr. Olivia Parker was assigned as our liaison. She was a diplomat by title, but I later learned she had an extensive military background, a common pattern among human representatives to alien species. You have to understand, Parker told me during one of our early meetings, most of human history is the story of preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. Your species seems fixated on conflict, I observed. Is peace not valued in human culture? Parker laughed, but there was little humor in it. Peace is valued above almost everything. That's why we're so good at war. I must have looked confused because she continued, throughout our history the most peaceful periods came after the most devastating conflicts. We learned that the best way to maintain peace is to be so formidable that aggression becomes unthinkable. This paradox fascinated me. A species that perfected warfare in pursuit of its elimination. When I published my initial findings, many in the coalition dismissed them as sympathetic exaggeration. How could a species with such violent tendencies be trusted with advanced technology? The Rigel incident changed that perception. It happened during the 5th year after first contact. A human colony vessel, the HSV Pioneer, was conducting a survey of the Rigel system, well within their treaty-established exploration zone. Unknown to them, a splinter faction of the Drask hegemony had established an illegal mining operation on the system's 4th planet. The Drask, assuming the humans were coalition enforcement, attacked without warning. The Pioneer, a civilian vessel with minimal defensive capabilities, should have been destroyed in minutes. It wasn't. When coalition peacekeepers arrived 3 days later, they found the Pioneer damaged but operational, and the Drask facility reduced to smoldering ruins. The human captain, Alejandro Rivera, submitted a full report. When the attack began, we activated emergency protocols. Our science team converted geological survey equipment into makeshift weapons. Our engineers repurposed thruster assemblies to create defensive shields. Our medical staff synthesized compounds that could incapacitate drastic biological systems based on environmental samples we'd collected earlier. The most alarming part wasn't what they'd done, it was how quickly they'd done it. The humans had adapted, improvised, and overcome a technologically superior force in less than 72 hours. This is what humans call asymmetric warfare, Parker explained when I asked her about it. Throughout our history, technologically inferior forces have defeated superior ones by changing the nature of the conflict. It's deeply ingrained in our strategic thinking. That incident earned humans a grudging respect among the more militant council species. It also accelerated changes in coalition security doctrine. If humans could repurpose civilian technology so effectively, what would they do with actual military hardware? The answer came sooner than expected. 8 years after first contact, pirates operating in the Cygnus Expanse targeted a human colony transport. The coalition had been dealing with these pirates for decades, a persistent nuisance, but one contained to the fringes of civilized space. The human response was disproportionate. They didn't just defend their ships. They launched what they called a pacification campaign across the entire sector. A newly formed branch of their military, the Human Expeditionary Force, systematically eliminated every pirate outpost, staging area, and support network in the Expanse. The campaign lasted 6 months. The pirates never returned. You committed significant resources to eliminate a minor threat, I said to General Chin during an interview after the campaign. We don't see it that way, she replied. We committed resources to permanently solve a problem. Your coalition has been managing these pirates for 50 years. We ended the threat in less than one. At considerable cost, I pointed out. At necessary cost, Chin corrected. Humans don't believe in half measures when lives are at stake. Every transport that would have been lost in the next 50 years? Those are lives saved. Resources well spent. That philosophy, eliminate threats completely rather than manage them indefinitely, unsettled many council members. But it also led to an unexpected development. Species that had suffered from persistent security problems began seeking human assistance. The Tellarite Confederation, plagued by a warlord species along their outer colonies, contracted human security consultants. Within a year the incursion stopped. The Valturi Collective, facing an ecological terror campaign, invited human specialists to help. The perpetrators were identified and neutralized within months. Each success story spread humanity's reputation further. The species that many had hoped to quarantine was now being actively sought out. Human security firms became a growth industry. Human military advisors were in high demand. 12 years after first contact, the Council established new protocols. The warning beacons around Sol remained, but their message changed. No longer did they simply warn of danger. Now they stated, human territory, approach with proper authorization only. Unauthorized entry prohibited by galactic law. It wasn't fear alone that created this law. It was recognition. Humans had proven themselves too valuable to isolate, too dangerous to provoke, and too unpredictable to fully understand. My research continues to this day. With each passing year, I've gained greater access to human culture, history, and thinking. What I've found most remarkable isn't their capacity for violence. Many species have that. It's their capacity for contradiction. The same humans who design weapons of frightening efficiency also create art of breathtaking beauty. The societies that prepare so thoroughly for war also build institutions dedicated to peace. The species that fights so ferociously is also capable of profound compassion. But make no mistake, the law exists for a reason. Approach humanity carelessly, and you'll discover why the rest of the galaxy has learned to tread carefully around the masters of war who call Earth home. My research team expanded as human integration into the wider galactic community progressed. What began as 5 nervous xenologists in a remote Earth facility grew into a cross-species cultural exchange program with over 200 participants. Humans called it building bridges. The Coalition Security Council called it controlled exposure. Both were right in their way. 15 years after first contact, I witnessed something that changed my understanding of humans forever. I was embedded with the Human Expeditionary Force on what they termed a joint training exercise with coalition peacekeepers. In reality, it was an opportunity for both sides to assess the other's capabilities without explicitly stating so. Commander Sophia Reyes led the human contingent. A veteran of both the Rigel incident and the Cygnus campaign, she had a reputation for unorthodox solutions. The coalition force was commanded by Dravtok, a seasoned peacekeeper from the warrior clade of the Vorn hierarchy. "Your species has impressive tactical adaptability," Dravtok commented during the exercise planning. "But real conflict is not a simulation. There is chaos, uncertainty." Reyes smiled. "With respect, uncertainty is our natural habitat. Perhaps we should demonstrate?" What followed was a scenario that would later be taught in coalition military academies: the Battle of Proxima Station. A simulated emergency in which a critical habitat suffered catastrophic damage while under attack from an unidentified hostile force. The coalition team approached it methodically, establishing a perimeter, securing survivors, following established protocols for damage control. Their response was textbook perfect. The human approach was anything but textbook. They divided into specialized teams with overlapping responsibilities. They repurposed environmental systems as weapons. They created improvised medical equipment from available materials. Most notably, they employed a strategy that sacrificed optimal outcomes in some areas to achieve critical objectives in others. "You allowed Sector 4 to decompress completely," Dravtok noted in the after-action review. "Those simulated civilians were sacrificed to save everyone in Sectors 1 through 3, Reyes replied evenly. "The structural analysis showed Sector 4's bulkheads were already compromised beyond recovery. Diverting resources there would have cost more lives overall." "Such calculations seem cold for a species that claims to value compassion," said Dravtok. Reyes' expression hardened just slightly. "There is nothing colder than losing everyone because you refuse to make a difficult choice. Compassion means doing what's necessary to save those you can." That tension, between idealism and pragmatism, between what humans wish to be and what circumstance forced them to become, defined my understanding of their approach to conflict. Humans didn't love war. They simply refused to lose when the stakes were high enough. Everything changed with the Arcturus event. 17 years after first contact, a research station in the Arcturus system detected an anomaly at the edge of scanned space. Initial readings suggested a natural phenomenon, unusual but not alarming. Coalition protocols classified it as a Level 2 scientific curiosity. Human protocols classified it as a potential extinction-level threat. "Your assessment is drastically overblown," argued Council Representative Tvari during an emergency session. "The energy signature does not match any known weapon system or natural hazard." "That's exactly the point," countered Admiral Diallo of the Human Defense Force. "It doesn't match anything we've seen before. And it's moving with purpose." The debate might have continued for months through proper coalition channels. Humans didn't wait. They deployed a long-range reconnaissance fleet to Arcturus within 48 hours. What they discovered sent shockwaves through the Council. The anomaly was a vanguard. Behind it came something ancient and vast, a swarm consciousness that humans called the Void Collective and the Coalition would later term the Negation Entity. It had consumed 3 star systems before encountering Coalition space, leaving nothing but stripped planets and radiation. "This is a clear case for Coalition peacekeeping intervention," declared High Counselor Zhen after reviewing the human data. "We will assemble a response force and establish containment protocols." Admiral Diallo's response was transmitted from the bridge of the HDF Invictus. "With respect, Counselor, containment is not an option. This entity doesn't negotiate. It doesn't establish boundaries. It consumes. The only viable response is elimination." "Your species defaults to extermination rather than exploration," Tvari replied sharply. "This entity may be intelligent. Communication might be possible." "We tried communication," Diallo said grimly. "It responded by disintegrating the research outpost on Arcturus 4. 2,000 lives gone in seconds." The Coalition debated while humans prepared for war. They converted civilian vessels to military support roles. They recalled scientists from across the galaxy to analyze the entity. They implemented emergency industrial production on a scale that alarmed even their allies. "We've seen this pattern in human history," I explained to the Council during an emergency briefing. "When faced with an existential threat, humans don't merely resist, they mobilize completely. Their entire civilization transforms into a war machine." "That seems an inefficient allocation of resources," noted Councillor Vex. "It's not about efficiency," I replied. "It's about survival at any cost." The standoff came to a head at Proxima Centauri, humanity's first extrasolar colony. The Void Collective altered course directly toward the human settlement. Coalition analysis suggested the entity was drawn to concentrated energy signatures, And humans used a lot of energy. What happened next revealed the true reason the galaxy had learned to fear humanity's capacity for war. Admiral Diallo presented a plan so audacious that most of the coalition representatives thought it was a bluff. The humans would not evacuate Proxima Centauri. Instead, they would use it as bait, drawing the entity into a carefully prepared trap. "You're risking your oldest colony," said Tvari. "Over 1 million human lives." "Every human on Proxima volunteered to stay," Diallo replied. "They understand what's at stake." Coalition peacekeepers established a perimeter at the edge of the system, prepared to contain the situation if, when many believed, the human plan failed. Most expected to witness a tragedy. What they saw instead was calculated fury unleashed. As the Void Collective approached Proxima, the humans triggered what they called the Helios Protocol. Solar collectors that had been gathering energy for weeks discharged simultaneously, creating a feedback loop in the entity's consumption process. Automated drones deployed specialized warheads into its core structure. The colony's fusion generators initiated a synchronized overload sequence. The coordination was perfect. The timing was exact. The force unleashed was beyond anything the coalition had authorized in centuries of peacekeeping. When the light faded and sensors could function again, the Void Collective was fragmented, its cohesion broken, its advance halted. And Proxima Centauri still stood. "How?" demanded Tvari when the reports came in. "The energy requirements alone should have been beyond your capacity." Admiral Diallo's response was transmitted across all coalition channels. "You've been measuring our capacity in terms of what we use. That was your mistake. You should have been measuring what we're capable of when everything we love is threatened." As I stood on the observation deck of the coalition flagship, watching human ships systematically hunting down the remaining fragments of the entity, I finally understood why the galaxy had enacted laws about approaching human territory. It wasn't just about protecting other species from humans. It was about protecting the galaxy from what humans would do if pushed too far. The fragmentation of the Void Collective should have been cause for celebration across coalition space. In many ways it was. Delegations from 17 species sent formal commendations to Earth. Trade agreements with human colonies expanded overnight. Military attaches from traditionally isolationist civilizations requested placement with human defense forces. But victory came with revelations that sent tremors through the highest levels of the Coalition Council. 6 days after the battle at Proxima Centauri, I was summoned to an emergency meeting on the Coalition diplomatic vessel Eternal Dialogue. The compartment was sealed with privacy fields beyond standard diplomatic protocols. Present were only the 5 senior counselors and Admiral Diallo. I was there as the recognized expert on human psychology and strategy. The Void Collective was not a random encounter, Counselor Jin began without preamble. It was directed to Coalition space. The evidence was compelling. Analysis of the entity's trajectory showed subtle course corrections that couldn't be explained by natural gravitational influences. More disturbing were the fragments recovered after the battle. Some contained technological components of unmistakably artificial origin. "Someone weaponized this entity," Admiral Diallo stated flatly. Her usually controlled expression showed rare evidence of anger. "Someone pointed it at inhabited systems and let it feed. We have identified energy signatures consistent with precursor technology," added Tvari, who had opposed the human military response most strongly. There was no opposition in her voice now. "This suggests involvement from a species with access to ancient knowledge." The implications were staggering. The precursors had vanished 50,000 years ago, leaving only scattered ruins and incomprehensible technology across the galaxy. Only 3 known species had successfully adapted precursor artifacts to modern use. All were Coalition members. "You believe one of your own did this?" Diallo asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "We cannot discount the possibility," Jin admitted. "Though we must consider alternative explanations. Perhaps an unknown civilization beyond charted space. Perhaps a rogue faction." I observed the subtle shift in Admiral Diallo's posture, the slight straightening of her spine, the almost imperceptible narrowing of her eyes. I had studied humans long enough to recognize the signs. This wasn't just anger. This was the cold calculation that preceded human warfare at its most terrible. "The Coalition requests humanity's assistance in the investigation," Zhen continued. "Your species has demonstrated unique problem-solving capabilities." "What my esteemed colleague means," interrupted Counselor Vex, "is that humans are paranoid enough to think like whoever did this." Admiral Diallo's response chilled the room. "We're not paranoid, Counselor. We're prepared. There's a difference." Within hours, The dynamic between humans and the coalition shifted fundamentally. No longer were humans the unpredictable variable to be managed. Now they were the hunters, seeking an enemy that had operated undetected within galactic civilization. I requested permission to accompany the Human Investigative Task Force. My rationale to the Council was the need for a coalition observer. My true motivation was more selfish. I wanted to witness humans in this new role. For 20 years I had studied them as warriors. Now I would see them as detectives. The Human Defense Force established a specialized unit designated Harbinger Team, under the command of Captain Aisha Nasir, a former intelligence operative with a reputation for unorthodox methodology. Her first action was to requisition a coalition database of all known precursor artifact discoveries over the past century. "You're assuming the weapon was recently developed," I observed as we reviewed the data aboard the HDF Cassandra, a vessel specifically designed for intelligence operations. "I'm not assuming anything," Nasir replied, eyes fixed on the holographic display. "I'm establishing a timeline. Whoever did this didn't wake up yesterday and decide to weaponize an ancient cosmic horror. This was planned, tested, perfected." Her methodology was unlike anything in coalition investigative protocols. Where our investigators would have established formal parametric searches, Nasir created what she called threat models, psychological profiles of potential perpetrators based on the evidence. "Whoever did this wanted maximum destruction with minimum attribution," she explained to her team. They wanted the Void Collective to appear as a natural phenomenon. They didn't expect anyone to respond quickly enough to capture intact fragments. "They didn't account for human paranoia," added Lieutenant Rajesh Khan, the team's technology specialist. The room filled with grim laughter. "Preparedness," corrected Nasir with the ghost of a smile. "As the Admiral says." 2 weeks into the investigation, we identified 3 systems where the Void Collective had been tested on uninhabited planets before being unleashed on populated worlds. The evidence was subtle. Traces of the same energy signature, minimal debris with the same technological markers. In each location we found something coalition investigators had overlooked. Observation posts carefully disguised as natural formations. "They watched it feed," Nasir said quietly as we examined the third such installation. "They took notes." The breakthrough came when Lieutenant Khan identified a pattern in the subspace distortions left by the entity's passage. They weren't random deteriorations of spacetime. They were encoded data. The entity had been transmitting information back to its controllers as it consumed. "It wasn't just a weapon," Khan explained during the briefing. "It was reconnaissance. Everything it devoured, it analyzed and reported." The implications sent shockwaves through coalition leadership. If true, whoever deployed the entity now possessed detailed information on coalition defense systems, population centers, and resource distribution. The galaxy had been mapped for conquest. As the investigation progressed, evidence pointed toward Alturian involvement. The Alturians were one of the oldest coalition members, a species renowned for their technological achievements and philosophical pacifism. They had been among the loudest voices opposing human military expansion. "It doesn't make sense," argued Tvari when Nasir presented the findings. "The Alturians have been instrumental in maintaining peace for millennia. They have no military capability. That's the perfect cover, isn't it?" Nasir replied. "No one suspects the pacifists." The council was torn. The evidence was compelling but circumstantial. Accusing a founding member of the coalition of such an atrocity required absolute certainty. But if Nasir was right, delay only gave the perpetrators time to prepare their next move. The decision was made for us. 3 days after Nasir presented her findings, simultaneous attacks occurred across 6 coalition worlds. Not with Void Collective entities, but with conventional forces using advanced weaponry of precursor origin. The attacking ships bore no identification, their crews composed of synthetic organisms designed for combat. Most shocking was their target selection. Each attack focused on facilities housing coalition defense data or military coordination centers. Someone had accessed the coalition's most classified security protocols. As devastation spread, an emergency session of the council was convened. Admiral Diallo's transmission cut through the chaos of competing voices. "This is no longer an investigation. This is war. And war is what humans do best." The transmission from Earth that followed changed everything. Standing before the Earth United Assembly, the Human Secretary General activated the Julian Protocol, named for an ancient Earth Emperor who had reformed a legion after devastating losses. From this moment, all human ships, all human resources, All human expertise is at the disposal of the coalition, she declared. But we will not fight as the coalition fights. We will not deliberate while worlds burn. We will identify the enemy, we will find the enemy, and we will end this threat. Permanently. As I watched that broadcast, I understood why the law against approaching human territory existed. It wasn't just about their capacity for violence. It was about what happened when humans found a cause that united them completely. The galaxy was about to witness what humans truly meant by masters of war. And whoever had unleashed the Void Collective was about to discover the fundamental error in their calculations. They had given humans something to fight for beyond themselves. The coalition had never seen mobilization like this. Within 72 hours of the Julian Protocol activation, human forces had reorganized the entire defensive structure of coalition space. Sectors that had operated independently for millennia suddenly found themselves integrated into what humans called a unified theater of operations. I was embedded with the command staff aboard the HDF Thermopylae, the largest human warship ever constructed. Its name, I learned, referenced an ancient battle where a small force had held off a vastly superior enemy through tactical brilliance and sheer determination. The symbolism was not lost on anyone. Admiral Diallo had established a war council that included representatives from every coalition species. Not all were military. Humans insisted on including scientists, cultural experts, and even philosophers in their strategic planning. This isn't just about winning battles, explained Admiral Diallo during the first council session. It's about understanding why we're fighting them at all. The attacks continued across coalition space, but now they met coordinated resistance. Human combat doctrine spread through coalition forces, adaptable tactics, distributed command structures, and what they called mission-focused objectives rather than rigid protocols. Captain Nasir's investigation had narrowed the source of the attacks to the Alturian homeworld, but something didn't fit. The evidence was too clean, too convenient. When she presented her findings to the War Council, the Alturian representative, Delegate Shan, responded with unexpected calm. "We are being framed," Shan stated. "But not by an outside force. By a faction within our own government." The revelation triggered a cascade of new information. For centuries, the Alturians had maintained the appearance of a unified peaceful civilization. In reality, they had been fighting an internal Cold War between their public government and a secretive organization called the Continuity Directive. "They believe the coalition is a failed experiment," Shan explained. "They see other species as evolutionary competitors rather than partners. They've been planning this for generations." "Why now?" demanded Councillor Tvari. "Why reveal themselves after centuries of secrecy?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Linda Chin, a human cultural anthropologist attached to the War Council, spoke up. "Because of us. Because of humans." She called up historical data tracking coalition expansion and development. The Continuity Directive operated on a timeline spanning thousands of years. They were manipulating coalition development, steering it toward eventual Alturian dominance. Then humanity appeared, unpredictable, adaptable, and expanding faster than any species in coalition history. "We disrupted their timetable," Admiral Diallo concluded. "You terrified them," Shan corrected. "My people measure progress in centuries. You went from pre-FTL to a major galactic power in 2 decades. The Continuity Directive saw only one possible response: eliminate the human variable before it grew beyond control." The next revelation hit like a physical blow. The Void Collective hadn't been aimed at random coalition worlds. Its trajectory, if not stopped at Proxima Centauri, would have led directly to Earth. Human response was immediate and overwhelming. Battle groups deployed to key strategic locations throughout coalition space. Intelligence teams infiltrated Alturian systems. A specialized task force led by Captain Nasir targeted Continuity Directive installations identified by Delegate Shan. What followed was a masterclass in human warfare. They didn't just attack their enemy, they dismantled them. Precision strikes neutralized command centers. Specialized electronic warfare disabled defense systems. Tactical teams extracted continuity operatives embedded in coalition governments. The Continuity Directive responded with escalation, activating sleeper agents and hidden weapons platforms throughout coalition space. Battles erupted across a dozen systems simultaneously. The directive unveiled technologies that shouldn't have existed: gravitic disruptors, phased matter weapons, and most devastating of all, a second-generation void entity targeting the coalition capital world. The War Council prepared evacuation protocols, but Admiral Diallo proposed an alternative. We've studied the fragments from Proxima. We understand how these entities function now. We don't need to run. Her plan was audacious beyond reason. Human ships would form a containment perimeter around the entity. Specialized strike teams would penetrate its outer layers to plant modified precursor artifacts designed to disrupt its cohesion. Meanwhile, a coalition fleet led by Delegate Shan would strike directly at the Continuity Directive's hidden headquarters on Alchuria's third moon. This is unprecedented cooperation, I noted as preparations unfolded. Species that were suspicious of each other for centuries working in perfect coordination. That's the thing about facing extinction, replied Dr. Chin. It clarifies priorities. The battle for the coalition capital was unlike anything recorded in galactic history. Human vessels performed maneuvers that their engineers insisted were theoretically impossible. Coalition species adapted human tactics with centuries of their own experience. The void entity was contained, penetrated, and systematically disassembled from within. On Alchuria's moon, Delegate Shan led coalition forces against his own people. The Continuity Directive's headquarters fell after 3 days of fighting. Their leadership, Alturians who had lived for centuries manipulating galactic affairs, were captured alive. Victory seemed complete. The Continuity Directive was exposed and dismantled. Their weapons were neutralized. Coalition worlds began the process of rebuilding. Then came the final revelation. During interrogation of continuity leadership, a pattern emerged that no one had anticipated. Their responses contained embedded phrases, activation codes for operations even their own leadership hadn't been fully aware of. Captain Nasir's team decoded the pattern just hours before it was too late. The Continuity Directive wasn't the architect of the crisis. They were instruments of something older and more patient. Deep beneath Alchuria's surface lay a facility untouched for 50,000 years. Inside was not a weapon or a fleet, but a single consciousness, the last precursor, sustained by technology beyond modern understanding. For millennia, it had guided Alturian development, positioning them as its agents within the coalition. Its purpose was simple and terrible: evolutionary curation. It considered itself the gardener of galactic life, periodically pruning species it deemed evolutionary dead ends while cultivating those with potential. The void entities were its tools, designed to eliminate species while preserving their knowledge. Humanity represented something the precursor hadn't encountered before: a species that evolved too quickly to predict, too adaptably to control. We weren't supposed to stop the Void Collective. We weren't supposed to uncover the Continuity Directive. We certainly weren't supposed to trace everything back to the precursor itself. So this ancient being has been playing God with the galaxy for 50,000 years, Admiral Diallo summarized during the Emergency War Council. Deciding which species live and which die based on its own criteria. Its technology is beyond our comprehension, warned Counselor Jin. Direct confrontation would be suicide. Admiral Diallo looked around the table, meeting the eyes of each representative. That's what it's counting on. That's why it survived this long. No one challenges a god. The plan that formed violated every coalition protocol. It ignored evolutionary ethics, technological prohibitions, and philosophical boundaries that had defined galactic civilization for millennia. It was, in essence, perfectly human. They wouldn't try to destroy the precursor. They would communicate with it. Not through conventional means but through demonstration. They would show it exactly why humanity had earned its reputation as masters of war. Admiral Diallo led a diplomatic delegation to Alchuria, requesting direct audience with the precursor. The being allowed it, curious about these creatures that had disrupted its grand design. What followed wasn't negation or supplication, but a presentation. Human scientists had reverse-engineered precursor technology from captured void fragments. Human strategists had mapped every continuity directive installation galaxy-wide. Human intelligence had identified the quantum resonance patterns that sustained the precursor's consciousness. We could end you, Admiral Diallo stated simply. Not today, perhaps not easily, but inevitably. We adapt. We learn. We overcome. That is what humans do. Then came the unexpected offer. Not surrender, not even peace, but partnership. Humanity proposed a new compact. The precursor would share its knowledge openly with all coalition species. In return, it would join galactic civilization as an equal, not a hidden manipulator. 50,000 years is a long time to be alone, Admiral Diallo said. Long enough to forget that evolution isn't just about survival. It's about cooperation. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Then, impossibly, the ancient being responded not with defiance, but with curiosity. For the first time in its long existence, the precursor had encountered a species that didn't just survive its tests, but turned them into opportunities. Humanity hadn't just proven their worth as warriors, they had demonstrated something the precursor had forgotten, that true evolutionary advancement comes not from conflict alone, but from resolution. The law against approaching human territory remains in effect throughout the galaxy. But its meaning has changed. It's no longer just a warning about humanity's capacity for war. It's a recognition of something far more significant. Humans aren't dangerous because they're masters of war. They're dangerous because they can make war serve peace. The Precursor Integration Treaty, as it came to be known, transformed galactic civilization. Knowledge that had been hoarded for 50 millennia was gradually shared across coalition species. Technological advancements that might have taken centuries occurred within decades. But more importantly, the fundamental power structure of the galaxy shifted from hidden manipulation to open collaboration. I remained on Earth for 5 years after the crisis, documenting the changes in human society. Despite leading the coalition to victory, despite saving countless lives across dozens of worlds, humans didn't rest on their achievements. They studied, they built, they prepared, not for the next war but to ensure there wouldn't need to be one. The problem with being good at something, Admiral Diallo told me during our final interview, is that people expect you to keep doing it. Humans are good at war. But we'd rather be known for something else. Her words proved prophetic. In the decade that followed, human innovation shifted decisively toward what they called constructive technologies. They developed terraforming techniques that could restore planets damaged by the void entities. They created medical procedures that extended life across multiple species. They redesigned FTL drives that reduced travel time between distant systems from weeks to days. The war had revealed humanity's capacity for destruction. Peace revealed something far more impressive, their capacity for creation. The Precursor, now known by the name it chose for itself, Archival, established what humans called a cultural embassy on Earth. Not a political outpost but a place for exchange of ideas. The being that had once curated galactic evolution through periodic extinction events now studied art, music and literature from 1,000 worlds. Your species fascinates me, Archival told a human delegation during its first public address. For 50,000 years, I guided evolution toward what I believed was perfection. Beings that would transcend physical limitations to become like my kind once were. I never considered that evolution might lead to something different but equally valuable. The Alturians underwent their own transformation. With the continuity directive dismantled, their society confronted millennia of manipulation and hidden division. It wasn't an easy process, cultural reckonings never are, but it produced something remarkable. The new Alturian cooperative became one of humanity's strongest allies, their natural patience and long-term thinking complementing human adaptability and innovation. 30 years after first contact, I returned to Coalition Central to present my completed research. Humanity Ascendant, the evolution of a galactic power. The council chamber was different now, reorganized under what humans called the Round Table Principle, with no species given prominence over others. The beacons around Sol still broadcast their warning, but their message had been amended: human territory, approach with proper authorization and mutual respect. Your work spans 3 decades of human integration into galactic society, noted Councillor Jin, one of the few original council members still serving. What is your most significant conclusion? That we fundamentally misunderstood humans from the beginning, I replied. We saw their capacity for war as their defining trait. But that was never what made them unique. What makes humans remarkable is their capacity for transformation, of themselves, of their environment, and of those around them. After the formal presentation, I met with Captain Nasir, now Ambassador Nasir, who had become a friend over our years of collaboration. We stood on the observation deck, looking out at the rebuilt coalition capital. Ships from hundreds of worlds moved through carefully choreographed traffic patterns, including the distinctive silver-hulled vessels of human design. We always knew we weren't alone in the universe, Nasir reflected. We just didn't know if we'd be welcomed or hunted. So we prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. A distinctly human approach, I observed. Maybe once, she smiled. But look around. The coalition has adopted many of our methods just as we've adopted yours. The boundaries between species grow thinner every day. She was right. What had begun as human adaptation to galactic standards had become a two-way exchange. Coalition species now conducted military exercises with human-inspired tactics. Humans had embraced the long-term planning characterizing older coalition civilizations. The precursor technology once hoarded by the Continuity Directive was being jointly developed by cross-species research teams. The warning beacons remained, but their purpose had evolved. They no longer served primarily as a warning about humanity's dangerous nature, but as a reminder of what happens when cooperation fails and conflict becomes necessary. Humanity's skill in warfare hadn't diminished. If anything, their capabilities had grown, but their reputation had expanded to encompass so much more. 5 years ago, a new tradition began at the Coalition Academy. Graduates from all species spend one day with simulation units developed by human designers. They experience crisis scenarios drawn from human history, making decisions under pressure with limited information and conflicting priorities. The exercise isn't about teaching warfare, it's about teaching resilience, adaptability, and cooperation under duress. They call it the Thermopylae Protocol, after Admiral Diallo's flagship. The name has taken on symbolic meaning across coalition space, standing firm against overwhelming odds not through superior force, but through superior strategy and unbreakable resolve. Last month I retired from active research. My final publication wasn't a scholarly analysis but something humans call a memoir. Personal reflections on a lifetime spent studying a species that continues to defy easy categorization. I titled it, The Law of Unintended Consequences: How the Galaxy Learned to Stop Fearing and Start Understanding Humanity. In my closing chapter, I recounted a conversation with Dr. Linda Chin, who had become Earth's representative to the Galactic Cultural Exchange. Do you regret that humanity became known first and foremost as warriors? I asked her. She considered the question carefully before answering. We don't regret being prepared when preparation saved lives. But we've never defined ourselves solely by our capacity for war. That was the galaxy's misunderstanding, not our identity. And now, I pressed. Now the galaxy sees us more clearly, she said simply. As we are, not as they feared we might be. The law against unauthorized approach to human territory remains one of the oldest continuous regulations in coalition space. But it endures not because humans are dangerous, though they certainly can be when threatened, but because they are valuable. Their unique perspective, their creative solutions, their relentless drive to improve have become resources the galaxy recognizes as worth protecting. The masters of war have become masters of peace. Not through surrender or compromise, but through the same determination that once made them feared, now directed toward goals that benefit all sentient life. As I conclude this record, I find myself reflecting on how far we've all come. When the coalition first encountered humans, we saw them as an anomaly to be contained. Then as warriors to be respected. Then as allies in crisis. And now, perhaps, as the catalyst that transformed galactic civilization itself. The warning beacons still pulse their message at the edge of Sol system, reminding visitors to approach with proper authorization and mutual respect. But they serve another purpose too. They mark the boundary where the galaxy's future changed course, where an ancient cycle of manipulation and extinction gave way to something new and unpredictable. Just like humans themselves. This is Ventral, signing the final entry in this chronicle. If you've followed my research these past decades, you already know what I've come to understand. The law to not approach humans without authorization was never truly about them. It was about us, about giving the rest of the galaxy time to learn what humans already knew. That the greatest strength isn't in destruction but in creation. That the true mastery of war is in making it unnecessary. And that evolution's greatest achievement isn't the capacity to survive conflict, but the wisdom to move beyond it.